Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Office Hours. I am your host, Adam Coble, and we are here today to discuss the fine art of game mastery. I have 3 questions submitted by you, my dear math squad, that I'm going to answer today, and hopefully those questions will help you become a better game master, especially the people that ask them. If I don't help those people, woo, God help me. But one of the good ones, not one of the annoying gods like Corellian Lorethian. Forget that guy. If you want to get involved in Office Hours, if you're watching this and you're thinking, shit, I got a good question for Adam, all you got to do is go to my website, www.adam-coble.com, click that Office Hours link up at the top, fill out the form. It'll ask you to record your voice. If you're a shy bab, have someone else record it for you, or use a text-to-speech beep, boop, beep device and record it that way. I always like those. Someone recorded me a poem once. It's fine. Whatever creative shit you think that you need to get your question across, go ahead and do that. And and then I will get your questions and I will answer them in approximately the order they are received. Don't tell anyone, but very occasionally I will bump a question up in the list if I think it's really funny or cool or good. Today's questions come to us from folks with a variety of experience levels in role-playing games. But let's begin with someone who wants to push their GM game just a little bit further.
Hey Adam, I've progressed beyond the point in GMing where I'm just panicking and trying to keep up with prep. But now I want to take things a step further. Beyond my normal prep of fleshing out NPCs and creating meaningful so-called plot points, what ways are there to add that special GM sauce to a game? So I'm thinking of things that require extra effort or extra work, such as creating a map, creating a cool custom mechanic, or putting in extra effort to really bring an NPC to life. What are the things that I can do if I have extra energy left beyond the minimally required prep to level a gaming session from cool to still being talked about years later?
GM sauce. That extra effort, right? First of all, having any kind of extra energy whatsoever to put into your game is a great feeling. Such a great feeling. Good work. Nicely done. We talked a little bit about the struggle to create memorable games, right? In a previous episode, we talked about memorability and about how everyone remembers things differently. The idea that memorable isn't really a goal that you can achieve, but a byproduct of play, like fun or boredom. So struggling for memorability is maybe not the best thing to go for, but I don't think that's really what you were talking about. And we've also talked about using props and music and mood lighting and other stage tricks to kind of increase the theatricality of play, but I don't think that that's exactly what's being asked here either. What I'm interested in, as far as this question goes, is how self-aware the question asker seems to be. And a few things that got touched on during this question that really stuck out for me. So, first of all, congratulations on surmounting your GM panic. Congratulations on getting to a place where the game feels like it's an enjoyable experience instead of a constant source of anxiety. That's nice. That's a nice place to be. So kudos for getting there. I mean, here's the thing. GMing is often a high-pressure situation, right? I think we can all agree that we've felt that anxious, nervous feeling when GMing, and that it sucks up a lot of our enjoyment when we're new at the game or inexperienced as a GM, or we just don't have the energy to do it in the way that we feel is right for us because of other stuff. Maybe we're really busy in our day-to-day life. We don't have time for the prep that we want to. Maybe our relationships with the players are strained in a way that makes the game hard to enjoy. Maybe we just don't know what we're doing yet. So this is important. It's significant to call this out and to say, if you are feeling like you have surmounted that stuff, that's a big deal. So round of applause for you. Good work. A lot of people don't get there. Honestly, like I think that a lot of people, and maybe there's some folks in the audience who know this and have felt this way, but a lot of people just burn out on a game that has too much prep, feeling that sense of concern about never being skilled enough, right? Never being ready enough, never having enough knowledge of the rules, and that wears them down early on and puts an end to what could have been their GMing career, right? Maybe that's a thing that has happened to you, people in the audience. God knows I've struggled with that even now. So consider this question first. First and foremost, if you are not the asker of this question, this is an example of a person who has done it. And you can also do it. I believe in you. Now, if you're a new GM and you're listening to this and you're thinking, I'm never going to get over that panicky feeling, maybe it's never going to be any less difficult, it can be less difficult, and it will. Just let that sink in. If you keep at it, you're playing with the right people, you're playing a game that you enjoy, and you actually want to be skilled as a GM who has a good time fulfilling that role, you can do it. The anxiety of performing well as the game master may never truly evaporate. God knows it hasn't for me. You know, I still feel that like, oh God, I don't think I'm ready for this episode. I feel it every time we go into starting an episode of Nebula Jazz. I always feel like, oh God, this is going to be the one. This is going to be the one that's not going to be interesting. It's not going to be funny. But it gets easier to deal with. And you find tools to help you get to this place. It takes on a more manageable shape with time. So yeah, take inspiration. And remember, you'll be where our question asker is soon enough, wanting more than to just be a passably decent GM and desiring that role as star kick-ass game master that everybody remembers playing with. Now, I think you can desire this as a player too, and don't worry, we'll get to answering the actual question. But I think you can do this as a player. I think that there is a way to become a kick-ass star player in your group too. And God knows that I've had the honor of playing with a bunch of them, right? Strash and Sean from Bloodletters come immediately to mind. Now, this isn't a player advice show, so I can't help players right now, and that's not what this question is about anyway. So let's talk directly to the question here. So you're not losing your shit before every session anymore. Prep has become a habit, not an ordeal. But you're too ambitious to rest on your adequacy, right? It's time to up your game. Now, traditional wisdom would lead us towards, if we're to believe years of Dragon Magazine articles, the next thing to work on is your theatricality, right? In my opinion, adding things like music or mood lighting or fancy maps, handouts, bringing props to the table is about as useful as making your game good as putting on some frilly underpants is at making smoochie time memorable. 9 times out of 10, it's vaudevillian frippery that might help a little or might make you feel better about what you're doing, but most of the time, it's just fluff. It is surface fluff. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good frilly underpant, and I'm sure that your players would appreciate the hand-carved magic wand that you let them wave about when they play, but it's not making you a better GM. It's the magician waving their hand and snapping their fingers so you don't look over here at the work that they're doing. It's a distraction, and that's great. That's fine. It can help create verisimilitude. It can do things for your game. But don't think that just because you sunk 40 hours into making a handcrafted map for your game or conjuring the perfect character theme on your recorder, that it has made you a better GM. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't any room for artistry or craft. I think the first thing, though, the absolute first and utterly paramount thing about being a good GM is just being a fucking good GM. Like, the extra effort thing shouldn't be about going away from that and finding little tricks to spice up your game, but about digging deeper into the things you're already digging into, right? And not just being a good general game master, but being a good you as a game master. I think the biggest thing that separates a brand new novice, someone who has just recently said, okay, I'm doing an okay job game mastering. I can consider myself the GM of this group, right? This thing that separates them from someone who has confidence and experience and who is a good game master is their voice. And I don't mean literally like the thing they use to speak. It's a part of it, but I mean this in the authorial sense. When we hear people discuss the art of fiction, the craft of being an author, and I think that this is part of why people correlate authorship to tabletop game mastery, which personally I'm not about. I'm not about that generalized. Like, a role-playing game player or game master is nothing like an author, except when we discuss the art of fiction, we hear people talk about and we understand that all writers, all creators of that kind of content have a voice, which is to say their means of conveying information to the reader in a way that is undeniably, indistinguishably them. Have you ever seen one of those, like, I think it's McSweeney, one of those articles where they take a piece of fiction, like the introduction to Moby Dick or whatever, and they rewrite it in the style of a dozen different authors? So you would get like the opening paragraph from Moby Dick as written by Mark Twain, as written by William Gibson, as written by Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? This is because these articles are funny because, or interesting because, we can recognize an author's voice no matter what it is that they are writing. Authorial voice is the style and substance of the GM's art. It's the way we narrate a scene, the way we craft our NPCs and move them through the world. It's how good GMs can all be good at the same art, or even the same art practiced by the same game, but be good in different ways. So what you can do with that extra GM energy that you have developed, now that you can dedicate some of your anxiety time to improvement instead, is work on your voice. Find the things that drive your passion about being a GM and focus on those. What do you love about being a game master, right? You cannot feel, this is a truism, I think, if I've ever stated one. You cannot experience love in the midst of trauma, right? So if you're in the midst of feeling a traumatized experience, if you're like, I'm on the edge constantly, I am in crisis mode, I am in survival mode, I cannot enjoy this, I am only trying to get by, you can't appreciate or love it. We need spare emotional energy to be able to love a thing above and beyond it just making us feel anxious. So now that you've got some of that energy back, your anxiety has abated somewhat, find the thing about game mastering that you love and focus on that. For me, it's NPCs. We all know this. This is a thing I've talked about a million times. I can do a pretty decent job describing a place or a scene, but what really makes my GM engine go is portraying people. So when I have extra time and energy for GM stuff, rare that might be, I sit with that content. I'll look over my notes. I'll spend time imagining the characters in the world. I'll practice their literal voices in my head or out loud. Before every single episode of the West Marches, I know this is a player thing, but I do this for other shows, I would go for a walk and just talk to myself in the character's voice. give them some room in my brain to percolate. When I want to challenge myself, I look critically at the characters that I've created, and I look for ways to improve or deepen them. I try to use some of my energy to look for and break patterns, improving the thing that already makes my GMing good. The other thing you can do is focus on the places that you're not good and want to improve, right? Now, I am a believer in specialization. I don't think that it's good to just be generically good at everything. I don't want to be a 6 in all things. I would like to be a 12 in one thing and like a 5 in everything else. But maybe that's not you. Maybe you want to be more generally good. The ways in which you may be experiencing weakness as a game master might be rules mastery, right? In which case you can improve by whatever means you usually use to learn something. Make notes on the confusing parts of the rules, practice mock combat with your friends, talk to other GMs about their interpretation of the rules, right? So rules might be a way you need to improve. Focus on that. It might be geography of your world. It might be characters, locations, relationships between characters. I don't know. Shore up your weaknesses by practice and by careful meditation on what your particular strengths are. And don't beat yourself up about the stuff you're not great at. Get that up to a level where you're comfortable, even if it's not perfect yet, and then just fucking let it go. It's okay to just be all right and not be fucking grade A plus 100 at everything. Now, I can't say this enough, but if you want to get better, record yourself. Listen to it. Make notes on your own performance. Be your own biggest critic, but be fair and gentle with yourself about not being perfect. Nobody is perfect. Nobody will ever be perfect. You just want to feel proud of your work and have something you can call your own. Develop your style. Now, I do think that presentation is a part of GMing. I think that arbitrarily assuming that props or music will make your game better is a mistake, but I think that what we can do as a GM is tap in to our other non-GMing skills and improve our game. What else are you as a person good at? How can those things improve your game or just enhance the way your creative brain works? Because having a brain that functions creatively makes you a better person. Being a better person makes you a better game master. Right? If you're a musician, go ahead and write that character theme for an NPC you like. Don't assume that this music is for the game, but it's for you. In the same way you might write a short story or draw a picture of a character. It will inherently improve your ideas about that character, give you a better understanding of how to make them move through the game authentically. It'll make you a better GM. Are you a chef? Do you like to cook? Make a dish that inspires you, something analogous with a culture in your game. Why did you choose that dish? What did putting it together help you understand about the culture that might eat it in your game world? Now, it sounds silly and hokey, but this is totally real, right? So let me give you a real world example, because I think that grounding things in examples helps show that they are meaningful advice and not just me making shit up. When I had a group that I played Night Witches with. This was way back when we were just kind of getting started with Swan Song, and I still had time to play role-playing games in person. So we played a game of Night Witches, and one of our players went out of their way to make a meal, a like Russian meal for us before we did character creation the first time that we played. And sitting down and eating that food and thinking about where that food would have come from if we were the characters in the game, thinking about what it would be like to eat that food in the context of the game and to share a meal with other characters in that position actually really helped me get in mind of the character I was going to create. It really helped. It was stupid, because it seems so hokey, but for me and in that instance, it helped. It won't always help, but for you, even if you don't want to share it with your group, even if you don't think that they're going to take it seriously as an experience that way, doing it yourself, making that food and eating it yourself will help you understand some tiny part of your game, right? What are your skills? What are you good at, right? And this is so fun. This is really fun to be able to look at the things that you're good at and then acknowledge them as being a contributor to another thing that you're getting good at, right? Skills build on each other. One thing that you mentioned in your question, and I really want to call this out because I think that this is a big way that you can improve your game as you advance as a GM, and a way that I think improves the hobby overall if we do more of it. Game design. Game design, right? You mentioned if you have energy left over, what kind of like hacks can you do? Can you create custom stuff for your game? Adding a custom monster, custom spell, a whole class, some new moves to your game is a way to better understand and craft that game. I've said before that I think that all GMs are eventually in some way or another game designers. Those ways are large and small depending on the game and the player. And I think that it's a fantastic way to contribute something unique and new to your game. If you're playing a game like Apocalypse World, it's basically necessity of play, right? An easy act of love you can perform for your game to make a new move. It's amazing how the process feels when you actually just sit down and do it. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be drawn out. You're not making a new class necessarily. You're just making a little thing to put a pin in the game to say, this is mine. If you're playing something more complex, find a small thing you can create that won't upset the balance of your game. Something you can stamp as your own, something little. Some atomic particle, the game's quark. Adjust that. Find some place you can put your own personal stamp on it, and it's going to make your understanding of the game deeper. It'll show you that game design isn't impossible, and before you know it, you're going to be crafting your own content. Maybe you're going to end up in a place where you're starting a game design project of your own. Now, I reject the idea that there's an evolutionary chain here. We don't go player, game master, designer, like some kind of nerd Pokemon. I think that each type of skill builds on and supplements the others. So I suppose then if your intention is to go above and beyond what you might consider the baseline of your GM competence, you ought to look at what your passions are in-game and out of game and follow those. Embrace the things that you love in your life and in games, and let that inform what your GM voice is. Let that voice develop. Embrace it and listen to it. Discerning and discovering what drives you to be a good game master is the best possible thing you can do. We don't GM to serve others. We don't GM so that we get love and adoration from our players. We don't GM so that we are desired as a commodity because no one else will game master. We GM because we love the art of it. Because sitting down at the table and game mastering feels fucking awesome. We love the rules and the roles that we're given as that type of player. And the details of that love, the expression of that love, is different for everyone. Strive to understand what makes you feel the best about game mastering. Focus your time and energy there. Don't fuck around with the stuff you don't really care about. And it's going to make you a more passionate, driven game master. And the people that you play with will feel that, and they will engage that passion a lot more than if you just download another bad fantasy instrumental to loop in the background of a combat scene. Treat game mastering like an art. Treat it like a discipline. Practice it mindfully, and you'll become the GM that you want with time and practice. I think that's how it goes.
Hi, Adam. My question is about shifting GM authority over the course of a campaign. I recently started to wrap up a campaign I've been running for about 6 months. We started with 2 GM-less games, Microscope to establish the general backstory and setting, and The Quiet Year to establish the local setting and recent events preceding the campaign. After these were finished, I ran Fate Core for my group for a number of months, and I felt that the transition from GM-less games to a game where I had the authority of creative direction over the game went quite smoothly. Unfortunately, I've become too busy to continue GMing, and so I wanted to do something to wrap up the game and get some closure. I decided to bookend the campaign by running a game of Kingdom, since to a large extent our game was built around political intrigue in an established location. It seemed like a good fit, especially because most of my players could continue playing the same PCs. However, I think this may have been a mistake. We had some trouble adjusting to the rules of Kingdom, but more importantly, I think that the removal of my authority as GM came as a bit of shock to everyone in the game, myself included. The more reserved players commented on how difficult it was to frame scenes. One of the more aggressive players tried to make the game all about themselves, and I felt frustrated with how the story went in directions I had never anticipated and had much less control over than before. My question is, how do you manage these sorts of shifts in authority in a campaign, if you do them at all? Is abdicating as GM in favor of a more anarchic play environment ever a good idea? I feel like I've learned something about myself and all the other players in this experience, but I'm not sure it's one that I would repeat.
So it sounds to me like this whole campaign was actually super cool. I love the idea of picking and choosing the right kind of mechanisms for the sorts of narratives you want to create. Let me say unequivocally that the whole thing just sounds like a really cool idea, and I totally support it, especially when it's done with all the care and attention that you and like maybe your group, but definitely you put into it. I think you can absolutely mix and match games like this and have a lot of success. But I think that just like picking any game you want to play, you can run into trouble. Now, generally, I'm very much into the idea of dissolving hierarchies. I'm into the idea of people choosing how much or how little to engage in a thing and taking care not to let themselves get put into a position where they're being unwillingly governed. I have thoughts and feelings about this. Games, however, tend to demand hierarchy, or at least division of labor in a specified way. Games have rules. That's what makes them games. Agreed upon authorities, either on the player end, this is your job, this is my job, these are the things you can and can't say, or more broadly, in the sense that there are elements of the game that must be followed by everyone. Games have rules. They wouldn't be games without them. Even a GM-less game isn't really that anarchic. It expects players to all act under a governance model presented by the game itself, which is cool. That's how we play games, right? We all sit down and we agree to play by the rules, and then we do that, adjusting for personal playstyle and preference within the bounds of those rules. So it's fine to say, we're playing this game, and these are the strictures of play within this game. And I don't think that dissolving the GM role and having a GM-less game is inherently any more inclined towards an anarchic style of play. I think the anarchy element here comes from consenting to play by those rules, to say, hey, this is a space, this is an affinity group we are all a part of, and within that group, we're going to behave this way for this amount of time, and that's how that's going to go. And if everyone agrees, then cool, you just consented to an experience that you're going to play. What it sounds to me like what happened here is that the players might have gotten themselves into a situation that they didn't anticipate or expect to be in, or perhaps didn't have the tools to navigate once they were there. Now, I might be wrong, but it sounds to me like these players didn't have any prior experience with Kingdom, the game you ended with, before you got into that part of your campaign. And it sounds like the big epilogue caught them a bit by surprise. So being able to shift from microscope to Quiet Year to Fate is a pretty serious act of narrative juking. So it doesn't feel to me like the authority modeling here is the problem. You did a fine job going from Microscope to Quiet Year to Fate, right? The problem came at the end of the game when you played Kingdom. And I honestly think that while Kingdom is a decent game, it's the weakest design of the 4 that you played in this campaign. And maybe your players just had problems with that game in particular. Rather than this being an endemic problem of your group and their relationship to the power dynamics of tabletop play in general, there might be a simpler answer here. Maybe your players just didn't like Kingdom. I find that in a lot of ways, we can't truly know if a game is going to be a fit or not until we see it in action at the table. And even then, a good experience with a group that works well together can cloud our expectations of a game, or a bad experience socially can sour us on a well-designed game, right? This is both the you can have fun with trash, and a good game can suck with the wrong group. So I don't know. I think that maybe Kingdom isn't the game for this group, and that it's not fair for you to yourself and your group to assume that it's their fault. Unlike Microscope, unlike Quiet Year, unlike Fate even, Kingdom is not a game that is easily learned in a single session. And often, the first time we play a game like that is not a positive experience. Right? My first game of Burning Wheel that I ran, not very good. Right? I didn't fully understand the game the way that I do today. So it can be hard when at the end of a campaign of 3 games that are good at being jumped into, you play a game that is not and you have a bad time, and it can sour your whole idea of the campaign. So what I really want to hit home here about is it's probably just Kingdom. Don't give up on the idea of broader GM authority mechanics. Don't give up on the idea of mixing and matching games. The advice here I'm trying to give you is to know what your group liked or didn't like about a game particularly, and remember that for next time. It sounds like you've started to do that work already, right? Something that I think can be handy if you're playing with the same group, or at least a group that overlaps a lot, is do debriefings after you play a game for the first time, or the second time, or the 12th time, right? Take the time to sit down and talk about games, especially new ones to the group, or ones where you had dissent over the mechanics. You'll notice we do this a lot in Roll20 Presents. We don't get an opportunity really to do this in roleplay, though we've been doing more of it with the Patreon videos. But the idea here is sitting down after an episode and say, hey, so what did you think? I saw you struggling with this mechanic, or I had a hard time with that mechanic, or I really liked it when we got to do this thing, right? Take stock of those things and remember for the next time you played. Not just, I like Burning Wheel, but I love the circles mechanic, or I really like the resources system in this game. Not, I hate Dungeons and Dragons, but I didn't like how combat focused it was, or I didn't like how taking damage didn't feel relevant, right? Make little notes in your mind as players, GMs and players, and remember that the next time you play a game, be like, oh, that's right. That's right. This player needed narrative reinforcement to make their actions feel valued. So we should probably try to play a game with them that does that, right? If you know somebody doesn't like hot dogs, do not invite them to your hot dog dinner. If your whole group really loves traditional GM player dynamics, do not play Fiasco with that group. Whether your group or any group likes the general concept of looser narrative authority models is going to vary based on a whole lot of stuff. And honestly, just one play session with a game like Kingdom especially shouldn't be enough to really just write off the game, let alone your strategy for building the entire campaign. I'm hearing you describe a situation in which you had 3 successes and a failure, and maybe Kingdom is that failure. Try that setup again. Swap Kingdom out for Archipelago, maybe. Give yourself a similar framework, but change a variable. Or pick a game you already know will fit your group, because some of you, or already of you, you've all played it. You've already had that experience together. Bookend with a game that you know is going to work, rather than pinning the entire campaign on a game you've never played. Now, there are a billion variables that contribute to a session going well, and maybe for you, narrative authority is the straw that fucked up your campaign, but it doesn't sound like it to me. So back to the drawing board, right? Or not. If you or your players just don't feel like engaging this experiment again, then fuck it. It's that easy. I like the idea of mixing and matching systems to make a game feel cool and interesting that way, and it makes a ton of sense if you think about role-playing games as toolkits for building narrative. Use the right tool for the job. And if you have characters, themes, and settings that can move through the permeable system barrier, all the more reason to do so. I think this is a great idea. It's a fantastic way to play role-playing games, and I encourage other groups to try it. But I also want to stress it means doing more work as a group to make sure you're picking games you're going to enjoy and that are going to work for you. Sometimes, if your whole group really likes playing Vampire, the right move is to keep playing Vampire. But if you want to do something else, if you want to try a bunch of different games, you're always going to risk missteps. And that's just how it goes. Don't give up on the experiment. Keep trying. Because I think it's a great idea. I think it's very, very cool. Keep doing it.
Hi, Adam. My question is...
You already asked your question, Kyle. Your turn's over.
Hi, Adam.
There we go.
My name is Alex, and I hope you're doing well.
Hi, Alex.
So, I am creating a Dungeons & Dragons club at my college, and the turnout has been great, and a lot of people want to play, but that's also a problem because I can't have 15 people sitting at the same table. So, my question is, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Obviously, I need to split up the party, but how would you go about doing that and explaining that to people who have never played before? Thank you so, so much.
Alex, first of all, praise you. You are a saint. You are a saint, and you are doing Gary's work, Alex. I think the only thing more awesome than playing RPGs is GMing them. And the only thing more awesome than GMing a role-playing game is enabling more people to play and GM games. Hallelujah. Like, you're doing great. Just the fact that you're willing to do this and stand up and say, hey, you need to learn how to play role-playing games, kids, and that you've lured 15 people to do it with you, I'm so proud of you already. So I think first, yeah, it's probably not a good idea to try to GM an entire group of 15 people all at once. Especially novices. Not just because it's a total clusterfuck hell ride for you trying to GM that, but because I think that as someone teaching people D&D, you've got the responsibility here to give them the best possible example of what the game and the hobby can be like. A 15-player game of 5th edition is just not going to be that. It's going to be not a positive game. Hell, a 15-player game of just about anything is going to suck. Except for Moldve. Sweet, sweet Moldve. But that's not what we're talking about. What I'm suggesting here, I'm gonna go out into left field. Are you ready? Here comes the crazy suggestion. What I would suggest is that you don't DM for them at all. Cue dramatic sound. Bum, bum, bum. Think about this. You've got 15 people here who are all brand new to the hobby. They are interested. They are willing. They are ready to learn. They are looking at you, senpai, with big watery eyes, hoping that you will give them a great experience playing Dungeons and Dragons. You are in a position to tear down a preconception that has plagued the hobby and created GM shortages since day one. The GM is not a special magical pony who shits storylines made of gold. The game master is just another player. I know, fucking revolutionary, right? So instead of being the GM and trying to teach by direct example, what I suggest you do with your little 15-person adventurers guild is break them into 3 groups of 5. Because what you've got in your hand is not one giant group, but 3 perfectly sized groups. And in each group, you sit down and you explain to those players, this is how role-playing works. 1 of you is the dungeon master. 4 of you are players. If you're a player, this is your job. This is your role in the game. These are the things that you're going to need to do. If you're the GM, this is your job, and this is what you need to do in the game. Now, you've all got different things to pay attention to and different things to learn, and you're all going to make mistakes along the way, but let's give it a try. And then you let them play. You move from group to group as they're playing. You answer their rules questions. You help them out, but your job here is not to play the game. Your job is to facilitate. Your job is to mediate occasionally. And your job is to encourage them to be good players. Teach them. Only don't teach them Dungeons and Dragons. Because D&D demands prep. Prep demands familiarity. Familiarity is the enemy of spontaneity. You can't just pick up a copy of D&D, never having played it before, and expect to just, bang, hit the table running for 4 other people who've also never played. Even if someone gives you an adventure to run, and you have no context for it, you're probably going to have a stressful time. It's not really possible to wing it unless you're super brave, super willing to fuck up both your time and the time of your friends. You need very gentle friends. Playing a game that has less demanding prep is going to go a long way. A game where narrative authority is shared more, or it's flat across the board, can really help introduce people to what role-playing is in a less hostile way than Dungeons and Dragons. And I don't know, maybe if you want to, you can start with something really simple, like Action Castle. Action Castle. Action Castle is a perfect icebreaker and can get people warmed up and ready to play. Once they're warmed up, introduce them to a game like Fiasco or Fate or award-winning tabletop role-playing game Dungeon World if they really want to be an elven wizard the first time through. Try Microscope. Try Fall of Magic. Give people space to learn the really basic stuff like, what is it like to make up a funny voice for my character without being like, you are the dungeon master. You must be perfect. So saith Gary, right? After the first session, get everybody back together, have room to sit down as a group around a table and ask them about their experiences. Say, okay, so in your game, what did you all like and what didn't you like? What did you like in your game? Use that to help them get more out of the next time they come to the club. Encourage them to do homework, encourage them to read the games they liked, play off schedule, right? And then come back to the club and bring those experiences in. Give people permission to change roles. Didn't have a good time because you hated your character? Fuck it, make a new one. Didn't like the kind of authority you were responsible for? Fuck it, you don't have to be a player. You can GM next time. God, this whole situation is like when a toddler falls on their stupid toddler face and they look up at the adults like, should I freak out about this? And when we just laugh and we're like, you dumb baby, get up, let's go. They don't care. But if we're all like, oh, you poor stupid thing, are you okay? They immediately start to whine and cry. If we act like being the GM is this big, intense, hard, impossible task that only perfect super wizards can do, they're going to treat it like that. And the horrible mental virus of GM as perfect, impossible master of the universe will continue to spread, and we will just keep eroding new GMs' confidence before they even get a chance to hit the table. Treat GMing just like any other dumb thing, and choose games that will support you, not make a filthy, stinking liar out of you. Like if you tell your people, if you tell your club, hey, don't worry, being a GM is just as easy as playing a player, and then you give them Dungeons and Dragons, which will lie to them. It will say to them, hey, guess what? Being a GM is really fucking hard. They are going to be mad at you. They're going to be mad at Dungeons and Dragons. They're going to be sad, and they're going to have a shitty time. So don't let the game you're playing make you look bad, because I care about you in this situation too, right? Now, this is all predicated, the answer to this question is all predicated on the idea that you want first and foremost to be a good teacher of role-playing games. If you started this club, and I'm not saying you did, but if you started this club so that you could get more people to play D&D with, shame on you. Not really, but this is not going to help you. If what you really want is to game master and you want people to game master with, starting a club to teach people who have never played D&D before is not the right way to do it. So I'm assuming you are okay with not playing. I'm assuming that the reason that you're doing this is to facilitate the creation of new, better, cooler, hyper game masters and players. You want to embiggen the hobby. And if that's your goal, Alex, then hallelujah. Hallelujah, girl. So I think the thing to remember here is that these people that you are playing with are soft, smushy, malleable little nerds, and you can teach them to be awesome role players without all the crappy hang-ups we get saddled with so easily when we come into the hobby with more experienced people, when we buy into the story that Gary told us, that stinking, filthy lie that game masters are somehow special. Right, exactly. These players are soft, and you can make them hard, like you. Teach them our ways, Alex. Make them role players who care about consent. Role players who know how to pick the right game. Role players who treat their fellow gamers like humans. Teach them to play to find out what happens. Teach them to play a game like it's a conversation between equals. Spread the motherfucking gospel, Alex, because this is the responsibility that we have, whether we are in charge of a gaming group with one player who has never played before, or we sit down every week in front of thousands of players, many of which who have never played role-playing games. It is our responsibility to be the best fucking example of how role-playing games work we possibly can. So this isn't just for Alex. This is for everyone. And I know that it feels like a lot of work. Being senpai is hard. Being someone that this burgeoning little RPG community looks up to for advice and guidance can be tough. But I believe you can do it. I believe that it's possible to help people develop better habits through being a good example. I believe in you, Alex, and all other people who are teaching role-playing games. I think you can do it. You just got to do it in a way that creates the kind of role players you want to see in the world. It's cheesy, but it's true. Let's dissolve the GM myth one group at a time. Get out there and do it. Thank you so much for coming. If you want to submit your questions, you can do so. www.adam-koble.com. Click link, type form, press button, and I will answer your questions. Keep them coming. Without questions, there is no show. So don't be shy. Go and submit your questions. I will see you again next week for our next episode. Thank you as always for coming, everybody. I'm Adam Koble. This has been Office Hours.